Okay, good evening. Oh, I'm just ahead of myself there. Good afternoon, I meant to say. That's a good start. Thank you for coming along to this session. I'm Matt Brewer. I've got the easy task of just doing some intros and trying to keep us to time. What I would like to do is just intro the session. It is all about implementing learning management systems or learning systems in general. And I know we hear various things about, the LMS is no future, nobody's getting them anymore. Strangely enough, that doesn't seem to be the case. And from a personal point of view, my company are going through exactly the same thing shortly, so I'm going to be listening avidly. The two presenters that we have Mel Cooley from NewsQuest Media, and she's going to be talking about her experiences of implementing various learning management systems, some well, some perhaps didn't go so well, but also she has been an award winner for one of her implementations as well. And also we have Andy Wooler from Hitachi Vantara. The headquarters in California, and you're based in Dusseldorf, which makes sense somewhere, that's great. But again, has been through several implementations. This isn't going to be the, oh yes, we did everything perfectly first time and everything was rosy. It's going to be, yes, we cocked it up in places and we're going to tell you where we went wrong and where we learned from it. Okay, because I think that's probably what people need to hear. So what I will do is I will hand you over to Andy first of all, and he'll run through his session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have to say that any connection between the mistakes I'm going to talk about now and myself are purely coincidental. And they were all made by a friend of mine who we'll call Jim. But no, what I want to do is, I'm a great fan of negative brainstorming. I think if you can look at something and say, what's the best way to screw this up? You will come up with more ways to make something go wrong, which you can then flip around, than if we sit here and say, well, what's the best way to implement an LMS? Because that conversation will be over very, very quickly. So what I want to do is reflect on some 17 years plus now of implementing LMSs and some of the things that have gone wrong. I'm going to try to stick to the session objectives that were in the program. The one thing I do want to say here is that I'm not going to talk about the implementations themselves. You're going to hear more of that specifically from Mel, but I think there's a really important part of this that we all get wrong in various times, and it's all about the people. And Don very kindly quoted me in his book on this particular aspect, and I truly do believe you can do anything with technology, but people can stop you doing a lot of things as well. And just to let you know, there's a 20% discount on the cover price of this book if you buy today at the reception desk, and they still have a few copies left. And I'm sure Don will sign one if you ask him nicely. So there are a number of different groups of people where I've had challenges or seen challenges during my career. And I've been implementing LMSs as a corporate for, as I say, about 17 years. For part of that time, I worked for a vendor, very briefly, about 5 months. So I've also seen, from a vendor's perspective, some of the challenges, that the mistakes that we make. So here's my first lesson now. I'm going to go right the way back to the very start here when I worked for a well-known insurance company here in London. And we thought, what a great idea to get the CEO as our champion of our project. I've even got him on video saying, this is a no-brainer. A year later, when he was sacked and every one of his good ideas was removed from the building, you can imagine what that did. So there's a huge, huge lesson here. It's being very, very careful about who you're choosing to sponsor and not making the mistake, as we did, of thinking, let's go for the top, because that can come back and bite you severely. And it did us, and we lost a lot of credibility after his departure because we were so intricately linked with the regime that had been seen to have failed. So that's an interesting one that probably a lot of people wouldn't think about, but be very careful about that. And also, he was not active in the project. He was just a name figure, and that really was a big mistake as well. The sponsor we really needed to be able to call on when we got into trouble, and we weren't able to do that. We'd pitched ourselves way too high. That only became obvious after the event, of course. The next thing, really, for those of us who implement LMSs in a global environment, and we work in a corporate centre, how many of you are in that sort of position where you're implementing globally? Okay. From the same LMS project, we thought in corporate centre, we know what everybody needs to have, we know what they need to be doing, and we failed to engage some key people, in particularly the HR managers and the learning and development managers out in the territories. So when we came to launch, you can imagine how little ownership those people felt of this project. None whatsoever in some cases. And their input really is going to be vital. They need to feel they're a part of this, absolutely a part of this. Trying to mandate people, if you're going to do that, make sure you've got a mandate. We launched that particular LMS as a tool for a global underwriting licensing scheme. Everybody had to be competent and they were going to be tested and measured. The LMS was going to do that. But we failed in one slight point here, a licensing scheme, and didn't mandate it. So you can guess how much use that got. So certainly in the projects I've been involved with Hitachi, that's a mistake we haven't made. We are fully engaged with all of our regions, and we are a global organisation. We operate everywhere in the world except Japan, surprisingly, where the parent company do everything. And we made sure that we learnt from this lesson of had every single one of those regions fully engaged. But if you don't, you're going to fail. And nobody likes that big corporate centre foisting things on you that you don't think you want to do because you have no sense of ownership. That was a big, big mistake. And so far, you'll notice I haven't even talked about the LMS themselves. And I'm going to come to that as well. This might seem like an obvious one, but involving IT, and once again, on global implementations, not just the guys in the corporate ivory tower. You have IT directors in your subsidiary companies in each individual country, and some of those guys, yeah, that's a gathering of them next door, you can hear them, will have different challenges and problems. And some of these have got worse in the 17 years. Things around data privacy have really, really taken off since those early days. We have GDPR on the horizon that a lot of you will be worried about. For those of you who work in Germany, you have the wonderful German Workers' Council. Do we have anybody from Germany in? You'll be familiar with those then. Little things like when you make your LMS decision, most of them will be cloud-based now, of course. Where's it going to be hosted? You're operating in Europe, so you make the mistake of hosting it in the US. That's going to be an interesting conversation with your Chief Information Security Officer, isn't it? And once again, I've been involved in LMSs where we did exactly that. We hosted in the US and eventually landed up moving to an EMEA data center to mitigate some of those challenges around information security from the European perspective. The other big thing with IT, though, this is a real big mistake that led to the end of my career at that first insurance company. We went out, we did all the due diligence, we did a very good RFP job, and we purchased Saba, behind the firewall Saba, 17 years ago. Perfectly rational decision. The company at the time were a platinum, or whatever it is, account with IBM. Now, IBM had Lotus Learning Space. Anybody here remember that? Yeah. For those who weren't involved with it, it did not run SCORM-based content. It was an absolute dog's dinner. But our IT executives in the UK said, you should have gone with IBM, because we sold our soul to that blue devil many, many years ago. Sorry, is anybody from IBM in the room? I hope I haven't insulted you too much. That came back to bite us later on when something else happened and the IT guys went off and said, that's enough with Saba. We're going to use what was then our current preferred house because IBM had gone out the door by then, and Accenture were the golden boys by this time. Anybody from Accenture in before I move on? So we landed up being moved onto SumTotal from Saba. Now, if anybody can tell me that that's a logical thing to do, or to move from any of the top 10 LMSs one to another, because I would say to you, from my experience, there is not one thing in the sort of work we're doing that not one of those 10 LMSs would be incapable of doing. I think personally there is too much churn by the vendors downstairs in convincing us that we need to move from this system to this system to this system to this system. And that's part of that, I'll come on to that, is also about the people you involve in running these. So that was a big one for me. Cost me a redundancy. But it did move me on to the opportunity to make the next set of mistakes. Sorry, to be involved in the next set of mistakes. So this is something I see a lot, and I saw a lot earlier on, and it's not so prevalent today, but the skills needed by the person running your project. How many of you had an IT program manager, very experienced program manager, put in charge of your LMS deployment? Anybody? Yeah. Did that guy know much about HR? Did he understand learning? Did he understand your business? These guys, you can do that. Don't get me wrong. Put a decent program manager who's put SAP in or Salesforce, and he'll put Cornerstone or Saba in for you. But he will deploy a system. He will not have deployed a solution because he's lacking all of this other context of the things that we land up having to then put right after you've gone live. So my caution there would be to say, you need to look for people running this who have a very cross-functional background. So somebody who's been in IT, but somebody who has been in learning, of course, who's got some HR experience, and I'm talking broad HR here in terms of understanding things like competencies and performance management, all those elements that you may at some point wish to start using within your LMS suite. The ability to analyze data is becoming much, much more crucial now. So the days of just running reports in your LMS aren't good enough. What does it prove if I say 95% of my people have passed data protection? Yeah. Is there anybody in here whose company's not had an attempted hack by Chinese or Russian hackers? Because none of those guys did your data protection course. Not one. So now we're starting to be asked to prove the value of learning through doing things like, you've run a sales course. Did the sales for those people who attended your training increase or decrease as a result of the training? And a lot of people can't answer that today because we work on our learning data in isolation. So somebody who's got a bit of an understanding on the power of data warehouses, rethinking the analytics that we present back to the business so they're much more meaningful than just counting bums on seats, which I bet we all still do. I know we still do to a degree. Does everybody else still do that? How many courses have been attended? Meaningless in that context. Get somebody who's done it before. Preferably somebody who's made all the mistakes. And by the way, this is not a job pitch. I'm very happy where I am. But it's somebody who's made all those mistakes, has just had a very valuable course on how to implement LMSs through experiential learning. And I consider myself still to be on towards the end, perhaps, of a 17-year-long course on how to try and get this right. And have a look at their network. Who do they know? Because we don't do this on our own. I learnt most of what I know about how to do this successfully over many, many years of networking with the right people. And you've all made a right start because you're here. Events such as this, the people you will meet here, you'll meet people who've done it well, you'll meet people who've totally messed it up. And and build on those networks. Somebody who has not got a network on LinkedIn of people who are recognized in our industry, you would have to question, is he really the right man for this job? He clearly doesn't know a lot of people in this space, which might suggest he's not been in it very long, or he's not well connected, he doesn't know the right people. All of those things together, I would say, are very, very important. And projects I've seen where the leader had none of those things are the ones that tended to drift or fail. And I saw this as a vendor with one particular organization who had a great guy from the US brought over here into a retail organization. He's like a fish out of water. And he couldn't make things happen. He didn't understand the politics of the business. He didn't understand how some of these things are done over here. And it is different to the US in the same way that it's different in other countries as well. How am I doing on time? Right, any vendors in here? Okay. Sorry to insult you. We know more about our business than you do, okay? Vendors come in, particularly if this is your first LMS, and they will give you the impression of, we've got the solution for everything for you. They don't, because they don't know what your problems are, unless you tell them. And unless you tell them in a very, very clear way that they can understand your business, how your business works, if you've got a current LMS, how you use that current one, because that's going to be important. You're going to want to move the functionality you have today into your new LMS. You've got requirements and the sort of people you have working on the project. My mistake 17 years ago. Oh, let's get a Brandon Hall 28-page checklist. Who's not used that? Who has used it, sorry? The Brandon Hall checklist over the years and sent it off as part of your RFP. Total waste of time. The best RFP I ever wrote was a 2-pager that had 5 questions, open-ended questions. This is our problem, how would you solve it? And I got more information back on those than the use of any of these standardized, templated RFP forms. So stick clear of that Brandon Hall checklist, throw it away, or any other RFP template. What you need to do is make sure that the vendor understands your business, the business problem you're trying to solve, and your requirements in a broad sense. Because we've all had those vendor presentations where they show you exactly how wonderful this is going to be, and it has no relationship whatsoever to how you run your business. Another often forgotten part of this equation are your instructional designers, your course developers. If you don't tell them that your new LMS does things differently, they are going to continue to design courses for the LMS you used to have. And if your previous LMS did not have collaboration features, didn't allow video, didn't allow this, didn't allow that, then they are going to continue to develop instructor-led courses with no collaboration pre or post course, and all these things. So we've deployed Cornerstone. It has a wealth of features in it that we believe can help transform from moving from a course to a continuous learning event through the use of what are admittedly basic but functional collaboration tools. But unless our instructional designers understand that they can do that and how that fits in, then nothing will change. They will continue to answer every problem with, here's an ILT, or if it's Fred, oh, you're going to get a video, or if it's this chap over here, it'll be a webcast. So a lot of lost opportunity with LMS is the functionality is there, but people need to be educated on how to use it. Now, that doesn't always go down well with instructional designers. As I found out in a job interview with a well-known health insurance company in the UK, where we were having this discussion about the role of the instructional designer. And I was asked the question, well, in this new world, what do you think is going to happen to those people? And my answer was simple. 50% of them will want to rethink their careers. Oblivious to the fact that the panel of 3, all 3 were instructional designers. Suffice to say, I didn't get that job. But I hope they learnt something from that, but I doubt it. And I wasn't just making that 50% up, by the way. That was backed up by research from the Open University's corporate university arm, where they interviewed their own lecturer base. Now, the OU, the world's biggest distance learning organisation, and they felt 50% of their current tutor base, this is back 12 years ago, would not transition to this new world of online learning and mentoring people in a remote fashion. As it turned out, the salary was rubbish at the job anyway, so it wasn't a bad loss. But yeah, so make sure these guys know that the LMS doesn't just do SCORM. Yeah, so be like Bill. This is a great one. And I heard this quote came from a head of user experience at Google, who I heard at the Maisie conference earlier this year. Remember, you are not the user. Okay, we've all done this, and I'm as guilty as everybody else. We are too close to all of this to be objective. We might design something and think, that's great, but we're not the user. And I rejected 50% of a curriculum of courses only last week because the person who created them had forgotten that they weren't the user. They knew what they were talking about. They knew when they said, click, and then you were meant to move to the next screen, and then they would continue the words here. And I thought, you're not the user. And I think it's very important that we have to remove ourselves, use focus groups to make sure that the user experience is designed with the user in mind. And none of your teams are the right people to be in such a focus group. Okay, we're way, way too close to it. I mean, me after 17 years, I can't be objective. And you need different groups for the different stakeholders you have, remembering that line managers can do a lot in the LMS. How many of you have got line managers who actively use all the line management functionality in your LMS? Not a single hand. But every one of you has an LMS, it has line manager functionality in it, isn't it? They don't use it. And they don't use it because we don't give them a reason for using it. We don't tell them how to use it. And it's probably a good thing, once again, to involve them in the user experience design, where you're allowed to, of course. Bearing in mind cloud-based systems, there's not a huge amount you can do. But even in Cornerstone, you can design your own welcome pages and do a fair number of different things to help. Reporting. How many of you left reporting requirements till after you'd gone live? Okay, I'll put my hand up. We did that on one. It's the wrong time to do it. You need to be thinking about the outputs at the start. Because part of the choice of your LMS will surely be, is it capturing the data that I need to be able to report on? All of these great analytics that we want to do, to be able to say, well, I want to compare this with that sales data, or I want to compare courses that I've done for engineers with our help desk data. You know, do help desk calls go up or down after we train them? And does that actually mean anything? Financial data. For those of you like us who are actually a profit center, we sell courses to our customers and partners. Then we have to be mindful of what data do we need to be able to capture to support the finance process that our organisation has for recognition of revenue. All of these things are absolutely vital to implement, and then get to the end and somebody says to you, where do the people input the PO number? Is a bit late. In fact, it's very late. So start early with IT on getting a data warehouse in. I think this is absolutely vital. I've been waiting 18 months for my IT team to start work on our new data warehouse to replace the one we had with our Saba system. Oh, we're deploying Salesforce now. We just don't have the time and the resource. Oh, no, we're doing SSO this week. We're doing something. There's always a reason why the L&D team are at the bottom of the list. So your only chance to make sure some of this stuff happens is to deal with this right up front and get that as a recognised project as part of your LMS deployment. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Which is why for the past year since our Cornerstone launch, we have been relying on Cornerstone's, I'll use the word analytics loosely, reporting tool, and a lot of use of pivot tables and VLOOKUPs to be able to do what we used to do in our Oracle OBIE setup with Saba. So I can't stress that enough. That's the biggest problem I have at the moment, is the lack of a data warehouse. And I work for a data company that sells data warehouses, analytics tools, boxes, you name it. So an element of physician heal myself, I think, in that one. The other thing to bear in mind is that when you do switch from one LMS to another, your IT team will not understand the database schema of the one you've got. Okay, all they do is host it for you. They won't understand what every single data item in there is, and when you're then looking to migrate that data into the new LMS, you're going to need some help. And this goes back to people on your team who understand this. And I was very fortunate when I joined Hitachi that we had a very long-established team, and I had one guy who was a real data guru, who understood the Saba database better than the vendor, Cornerstone, who said, oh, yes, we know how to move data from Saba to Cornerstone. I bet you've all had that story, haven't you? They don't. 4 people working a full weekend 2 weeks before deployment, fixing issues with data uploads. And that's not uncommon. So that goes back to the skills you need in the team. What are we doing? Okay. So lots of different things there, and I didn't mention the vendors too much at all. As I said, for me, any of the top 10 LMSs will do whatever job it is you want them to do. But you've got to know what it is what you want to do, and you've got to have the right skilled resources in the team to be able to make sure that some of those stupid questions you get, like, here's one I had in company number 2. The performance management form needs to look like this. Does it? Does it really? What's the purpose of performance management? Anybody like to answer that? It's not the filling in of the form. It's to manage performance. That's what it says on the tin. And it shouldn't really matter what the form looks like. But this was a deal breaker to these. Oh, we can't use Saba's performance management. The form looks different. The processes you use today were built probably, in the case of Hitachi, we had 9-year-old processes built around how Saba does things. But we're with Cornerstone now. It's like my ex-wife used to do it this way. But I do it this way, you know. That's past, it's gone, it's history. The processes should not be sacrosanct in all of this, and I think they're a big part of the job that we have to do as well, is just to make sure that people have really understood that actually the processes we had for our old LMS were for our old LMS. They can change, and there's no reason why they shouldn't, apart from people just hanging on to the past. So that's a whole load of stuff there. I hope that hit some spots for some of you, and are slightly different from the normal LMS story, because I haven't really mentioned the implementations at all. You're going to hear a great story from Ben on that in a moment. So any questions? Anybody disagree with anything I've said? Feel free to. We're all amongst friends. It's only going to be videoed. Yes? Yeah.
I resonate with a lot of what you said. What I'd like to ask, did your systems interface with any other systems such as HR?
Integrations, right. You're onto a very interesting area there. We have lots of integrations into our LMS. Obviously, all of our people data from Oracle comes in, our customer data, and our partner data comes in from Salesforce.com. All of that kind of stuff is incoming. We do some external integrations, and we're increasing these to use web services to surface stuff elsewhere. So our customer portal, for example, every customer goes in, their current enrolments are on the top right-hand corner automatically. So, and this is part of a concept that I refer to as the invisible LMS. And if anybody wants to check out my blog, you'll find 4 or 5 different pages on that particular topic. It's something I'm quite passionate about, and this is that we should take the learning to the learner and not the learner to the LMS. And by choosing a vendor where you can use a lot of web services, there's no reason why you should not be able to surface those core LMS functions at the point of need. So most customers use our customer system because that's where they get technical downloads, that's where they register a support case. So let's present the information there. Partners have their own system. There are lots of different places where people may be more at home. So for our internal users, they're more at home on our corporate intranet. Nobody goes to an LMS because they want to. Okay, they hate them. We know that because they have this mental picture of, oh, you're going to make me do another mind-blowing compliance exam. And we're all guilty of that. But that's not our fault either. That's people telling us to do that, of course. But, so yeah, I'm a firm believer that we should be integrating and using that LMS data at points of need way beyond the LMS. Yeah.
How do you get the balance between piloting the solution and scaling it for a global rollout, but keeping everyone engaged at the right level and at the right time?
Good question. 2 scenarios. First of all, if you're deploying from a greenfield site, then I think you would deploy differently. You would launch the functionality on a very phased basis. But for what we had to do when we were moving from one LMS to another, it all had to be working on day one. Absolutely everything, because it was running a $14 million US revenue stream. So yeah, in that instance, then we had to make sure everybody was engaged everywhere to be able to launch everything at the same time. A lot easier when it's new. But most of us don't have that opportunity to do it from scratch. And I think if we were doing something from scratch new now, we might do it differently anyway. There are other tools you might look at today that you might think, well, actually, and this is not a vendor pitch for anybody in particular, but to give you some examples, the sort of stuff that that you see with the Fuse International and with HT2T, those applications where you're looking at a much more social, collaborative environment. If you didn't have to make revenue out of it or were in a controlled organisation, you might think differently. We didn't have that benefit 17 years ago when I started. I was given the Lotus Learning Space version 1. But I survived. Any more questions?
We can take some more.
We'll take more at the end. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, we now have Mel from NewsQuest Media, who is going to recount her tales as well of, not of woe, but of some woe and some successes as well, of her experiences as well with implementing the learning systems. I'll hand you over to Mel.
Hello. Okay, before we start, this is actually the first time I've ever done this, so I won't lie, I'm a tad nervous, so please bear with. I have had the dubious pleasure of launching a number of LMSs, from the old, which was no more than an Access database wrapped in a web page, to the more exciting ones that we have now that can do everything but make a cup of tea. I'm sure if you went on them, you'd find out how to make a cup of tea. However, with trying anything new, mistakes are going to be made. And trust me, I've made a lot. So what I'd like to do in the next 20 minutes is really go through some of those lessons learned and some top tips on what we've done to make sure we don't do those things again. And I've split them into 4 key areas. So the first one is actually selecting the right LMS. Now that might sound obvious, but it's not as easy as it seems. The second one is actually preparing to launch your LMS. And that's about preparing not just the system itself, but your audience and as Andy alluded to, your L&D teams. The third area is actually the launch itself, the kind of things that we should have done and didn't before, during, and after. And then something that we really don't concentrate enough on, in my opinion, is actually the communication around the whole thing. Okay? So, the first thing about selecting the right LMS. Before you even go out and try and have a look and see what's out there, make a list of the things that you actually need it to do, now and probably within the next 3 to 5 years. Because you don't want to be buying an LMS and then realise that a year down the line you want it to do something that it didn't. But equally, you don't want to be buying something that has got all the bells and whistles and you actually won't be able to use it. In my experience, if you're launching an LMS for the first time, it'll probably take at least 18 months before people are using the basic functionality of it. So why buy a whole lot of stuff that it's actually not going to be used? The second bit, do your research. Don't get blinded by all of these lovely talks and the bells and whistles. Really find out whether the LMS that you're looking at is actually going to do what you want it to do. And you can only really do that by knowing what your requirements are in the first place. So I can't really stress that enough. And the second thing is what Andy was talking about, is actually get the buy-in from the top. The first time I actually implemented an LMS, anyone from the CEO down to even middle management didn't really know what it was about or why we were doing it. We had one sponsor and they were geeing it up, but then when we landed it, we had a huge uptake in the first couple of months and then nada, because there wasn't any direction from above. So you really need to get that sponsorship. So top tips on doing this. Get any vendor to come and demo the system. And make sure that when they're demoing it, that the key stakeholders that are going to help you drive that are there in that demo. We tend to ignore those kind of people, and we certainly don't invite the CEO to these demos. The other thing I've also found out is that before demos, vendors have tended to ask you what it is that you want the LMS to do. So the demo actually then demonstrates what you want it to do. But I've also found out that it doesn't necessarily do it straight away. It's not out of the box. Once you actually get down to the nitty-gritty, they're saying, well, yes, it can do that, but if you want it to do that, it'll either cost you more, or we'll have to do this and this as a workaround. So make sure that in the demos, you're talking about what comes out of the box, and you know about any hidden costs. The other thing about hidden costs is that a lot of the LMS providers license their LMS. So if you have got 100 people to 1,000 people that you want to be using the LMS now, it may be that in 2 years' time it was such a success, because obviously after this it will be a success for you, but there's another lot of costs because of the licenses that you have to do. Okay, so keep an eye on those kind of things. The other thing, and Andy alluded to this, that look at the reporting functionality of your LMS. We as L&D departments have to now really prove return on investment. So what are the reports that you can get out of the LMS? But I guess more importantly is, what do they look like? There's no point in you bringing out a huge report out of the LMS and then sending it to managers, but having to send them another bit to tell them how to actually read that report. Okay? So what do they look like? In my experience, dashboards are fantastic, as long as they're telling the manager what they need to know. But a manager they haven't got time. They want to go in there, have a quick look, yes, yes, yes. They don't want a spreadsheet report. So take a look at what the LMS is providing in terms of reporting before you sign up. Support. What support does your LMS vendor provide you with? If you are new to implementing LMSs and you've not had them in your business, chances are you're going to need a lot of support. Is that part of the deal that you are striking with that vendor, or is it another hidden cost that you're going to have to take account of? Believe me, I have been there. If you are like me and you've been in businesses where you're launching an LMS for the first time, trying to get a budget for it is hard enough. Trying to go back to the business and asking them for more money because you can't use it Doesn't make us look very good. Okay? So those, for me, are the top tips that you need to be thinking about when you're actually selecting an LMS. The second thing, preparation. Again, 3 elements. The first is getting the system ready. And Andy again alluded to this. The system is not about us. It is about who is going to use it. So you need to make that system for your end user. And you need to test the hell out of it before you launch it. We sold the last launch. It's going to do this, it's going to do that, it's going to do the other. People were booking on courses. Nobody was getting a notification because it worked differently. We didn't know that. We hadn't really tested it. We'd launched one event. The emails were working, so we built a whole lot more. We didn't test those. Nobody got notified they were supposed to be and didn't turn up, which was really embarrassing. So getting the system ready, again, is really important. The second thing is about our own L&D teams. Now, in my experience, most of the companies I've gone into have not had LMSs, so that their L&D teams are very much in the traditional classroom world of training. And we've managed to convince them that no, they need an LMS because it allows you to do follow-up, etc. But the teams themselves don't know what that means. And trying to get them out of the death by PowerPoint classroom session and saying that if it's knowledge, they can get the knowledge via your LMS. Oh, that's not going to work. What if they're confused about it? The classroom should all be about applying the knowledge that they've learned through the LMS. So it's really important that you understand about where your L&D teams are and how much you need to do to get them to a level where they can actually use the LMS effectively. And that might be, you may be thinking about implementing an LMS now, but actually to get people ready, it's going to take you 4 or 5 months. So let's not be going down that road just yet. Okay? And the third point is about the actual users. Do your users know what an LMS is? Do your users know why it's important? Do your users know how to access it? Do your users know why we're implementing it? All of this is really, really important. You don't want to get an email on the day of launch saying, here is your access, please go in, and they're sitting there, well, what's all this about? What am I supposed to be doing here? So you need to get your audience ready. So some top tips on being prepared. Alluding to what Andy said, make sure that you have integrated with your IT and your HR teams. I spent absolute months preparing a fantastic performance appraisal that had all the bells and whistles with a development review, observation checklist, you name it, it was lovely. We launched it. Big fanfare of a launch. In the audience, 2 or 3 managers put their hand up and said that they're not the competencies we use. And you've told us this is a 6-month and an annual review. We don't do it like that. We do performance reviews based on when people are hired. Big mistake. Okay, so make sure that you are fully aware and you have engaged with these people. Training. Alluded to it already, but I can't stress it enough. Make sure your L&D teams are ready and whoever's going to administer that LMS is also ready. The more complicated the LMS system, the more time you're going to need to do that. We are going through that pain barrier at the moment. I thought I knew everything about LMSs. Big mistake. I don't know anything about this one, and administering it is very complicated. So bear that in mind. Build it and they will come. If you keep your audience in mind, your end users, and you make it about them, and you make it easy for them and intuitive for them, they will use it. If they go in there and they're like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Where do I go? They will stop using it. They will become disengaged. And make sure that you, as I've alluded before, check those email notifications. This is one of the greatest selling points as to why you need an LMS in your business. The fact that people will be kept informed without having to constantly remind people. Courses that are due, the due dates come up. You're no more chasing emails because the system will do that for you. But if you haven't configured those, they're not going to work. And equally, make sure that you use personal tags on emails so that when people get an email, it doesn't say, "Dear all." It says, "Dear Mel, you're in big trouble. You have not completed this training on time. I suggest you get and do it." So make sure that these emails are configured and personalized, and you understand when they go out and how the system can help you. It will make your life a whole lot easier, and also it's a great, like I said, it's a great selling point. So those are the things about being prepared to get ready. So actually launching your LMS. Make it personal. When someone opens up an LMS, most these days allow you to have that tag in there. So when I open up the LMS, it says, "Hello Mel, we're glad you're here," something along those lines. Makes it personal to the individual. They think it's all about them, and really it should be. Make it intuitive. If you have to send a how-to guide to somebody about how to use the LMS, then I think you've probably got it wrong, in my experience. Okay? The other thing about making it intuitive is, I have noticed that very few people will use the navigation bar across the top. They don't want to have to go and hover over each thing to see what it says. And equally, there's not enough words you can put in there explaining that if you clicked on that, that's where you're going to go. So we spend a lot of time actually configuring that whole welcome page so that the way they navigate around is through buttons rather than through this menu across the top. People don't use it. And we find that we have a help desk, and the majority of it is, I can't remember what my login is. That's the big one. And the second one is, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. You've told me to go and do this course. Where do I go to do it? So make it intuitive and make it simple. Yes?
Now, you said in number 2, make sure they don't need a lot of help. It should be fairly intuitive. How about learning administration from instructors, super admins? In your experience, does it take a lot of training and how-tos and SOPs, or should that be equally as intuitive, and could it be in today's world?
Okay, depends on the LMS that you choose. Some of them I found very, very easy from an admin point of view. Others, it's taken a long time. I have tried to learn about a particular LMS, and so far I have managed to clock up 1,700 hours of online learning. And I still don't know what I'm talking about. So it's about the complexity of the LMS and how it all links together. So really take a look at that, get them to show you the back end of it if you're thinking about your administrator. But if that LMS is going to give you everything that you need, then book in the time to make sure your administrators know how to do it. And this 6-week implementation, I wouldn't go with. If you're new to it, make sure you've got at least 20 weeks planned in before you launch. Okay, does that help? Okay, the launch itself. I always use the principle of a three-click rule. So your front page, buttons, tells you exactly what they're doing on that front page. They click on that button, takes them somewhere else, click on that button, they're into the course, or whatever they're doing. If you think about how you use the internet, you're searching for something, you think, right, that's what I need. You click on that, then you've got to click again. By the time you got to the third one, you've gone back to the first page. Am I wrong? So if you think about it like that, that's what your LMS needs to do. Plan an email campaign. Send out lots of teasers. Make it as colourful as you possibly can. Guess what's coming? Create that curiosity so that when it does land, they know what's happening and what it's all about. Give them a reason to go in there. Andy said, talk to the business. It's really important that you do that. And I found that the last time that we launched an LMS, I went round, and the single biggest thing for managers was they don't have enough time to do their job. And when you narrowed it down, the majority of time that they were spending were in meetings. And most of those were meetings for meeting's sake. So we created curiosity by sending them little video clips on how to have a better meeting, followed by some activities they could do and learning that they could do to cut down on the meeting. So before they even got into the LMS for the first time, we kind of helped the challenge they faced. That way, they'll go in there more. They're thinking, well, that worked. And that's even before you've actually launched. And support. Make sure you've provided enough support. If you get all of those things right and you can continue the communicating of the LMS, which I'll talk about in a minute, then you need to account for the first launch having a lot of support, a lot of people at that support desk to answer questions and queries, a lot of information that people can go to. But a word of warning, if you do not keep the marketing and the communication about your LMS up, people will stop going in it. And then the company is going to launch a brand new process or a brand new product. So everyone has to go into the LMS to do it. And you will find that the support needed is exactly the same as the support that was needed in the first place. I can't get in. I don't know where I'm going because they haven't used it for 6 months. If you don't use it, it's not going to happen. Okay? So make sure that you have got that support network for everyone around there. One thing we have used a lot of is something we call super users. So when you start that initial training, when we're talking about the L&D team, if your trainers are completely up to speed with what goes on in the LMS and how to use it, they can be your super users. Or you can have those enthusiastic members of staff who go, yeah, I'll be doing that. Give them a buzz, give them a reason to do it, but make sure that the people on the ground know that they are the go-to people. That will help. Any of us have had to call a hotline for support, know the pain you go for. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And it puts us off picking the phone up or sending an email to get that support. So make sure there's support around, that people know where they can go for it. So, just to give you an example of what I mean. This is not out-of-the-box welcome page that you would see on an LMS. We've built this. Because like I said, people were not using the navigation bar. So we use just basic HTML. I don't know if any of you know Bootstrap, but we used basic HTML and made it look nice. You can see that it is quite intuitive. They know exactly what they're going to be clicking on, where they're going. The other thing that we did was we had a take a tour button. So we created a funky video with a voiceover, lots of animation to show them how to get around. We also connected it to other parts of the business. And the reason that we did that was because, particularly with things like the Ideas Hub basically is our studio which shows people how to make great graphics, something they have to use in their job. So we got them on here, training them on how to make great graphics. And then we told them to go to the Ideas Hub and they would find the documents and the reference materials and all of that kind of thing. But that means they have to come out of here, find the link to the Ideas Hub to get in there. So this was a big win for us. These are the things that people are going to be using on a day-to-day basis. Why not create a link directly out of the academy where they've just learned about it to that particular thing? Same thing with HR. We're telling them all about our policies, onboarding particularly, managers, how to recruit new staff. Well, there's a button there that takes them straight into the HR intranet where they can find all these documents. Okay? The second bit is their academy, all about them. So this is where I go to do my learning. This is where I go check off my to-do list. This is where I go to do anything to do with performance. It's very easy for them to understand exactly where they're going. And then here, we did this because it makes it look nice when they open it up. But again, you can see exactly where people are going. New manager, got a new starter. Click on here. This is where all the forms are for my new starter. Explanation of what the induction program is all about. The same with recruitment. And then I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but getting communication right is vital to land your LMS. Okay? This isn't out of the box. This is something we created ourselves as the overlay. It makes it easier for people to go in there. Okay, so going back to what I said before, if it's difficult for people to understand what it is they're supposed to be doing when they're in there, they ain't going in there again. Okay, emails campaign. You cannot email enough. Okay? Make them exciting. Let's go back now. Just make them exciting, personalise them, and also make sure that in your emails, if you're asking them to access the Academy or you're asking them to go and view something, they can do it from that email. You're not saying, get onto your LMS, you will find da-da-da in this catalogue. That will take them directly to where they need to be. Okay, so finally, but not least, communication. We do not do enough of this. You need to communicate prior to the launch. You need to tell people what's happening, why it's happening, give them a reason to go in there, create that excitement, create that curiosity. During the launch, we have provided our teams recently with actual launch packs that look really exciting. We've even provided them with headphones because we want them to go online and watch videos, etc., but it's an office. So it's not really conducive for them to do that. So give them a pack, make them feel excited, if you can do that. And then communication after the launch. As I said before, you can have all of this buzz around launching an LMS, but if you don't keep that communication going and keep giving people reasons to go into their LMS, it will stop and cause you no end of pain. So some top tips for that. Provide regular reports to the business. Tell managers how they're doing. A lot of the LMSs now provide you with leaderboards, but send that out as a marketing email to say, look who's on top of the leaderboard. Create that I work in a business, sales business, everyone's competitive. You know, I'm not on the top of the leaderboard, get me in there. Yeah? Managers, your team are at the bottom of this list. As a manager, I don't want to see that, okay? But you need to be providing that. Yes, a manager can go in and run a report. Yes, a manager can go in here and look at a dashboard. But, as Andy said, nobody does. So get it out to them. Give them a reason to go back in. Marketing. What I tend to do is I tend to find a couple of vendors that provide very exciting content. And then market that content. But again, talk to the business. Find out what they like. Demo some of that content to a focus group. See if it's landing or if it's not. And if it is, then market it. A lot of the vendors now will provide you with trailers or little 1-minute clips. We've just started a journey for management development. We sent them a 1-minute clip, which was a tiny little cartoon on how moods are infectious and how their mood will affect everybody else, and that the higher up the hierarchy, the more infectious you get. It did wonders. I've never seen so many managers take inspirational leadership in my life. But it's 1 minute, and we marketed it. So we have a marketing campaign, and it goes out every Friday, because that's the time of the business that has a downtime. Those are the kind of things you should be doing. Newsletters. We provide a newsletter every month. We call it what's what, what's hot, and what's happening. So, is there anything new? What are the success stories around the business? So again, it's about getting your end users to tell you how they've used the LMS and how it's made a difference, and we put those into a newsletter, but that newsletter is then sent out by us, and then people are reading it going, oh, I'm struggling with that, let me have a look and see what happens. So they're kind of generating that for themselves. Feedback. In my experience, provide somewhere within the LMS that not only individuals can provide feedback to each other, but also they can provide feedback to you. And sometimes it can be as simple as creating a Google form, or the equivalent in Microsoft, Excel, whatever it is, a form, and you just create a link, so that form opens up and they fill in a couple of questions and it pings off to a spreadsheet. It's that simple, but you're going to be getting regular feedback, okay? And see, one of the most important things for me is that the learners drive the traffic and the excitement about the LMS. So make sure, or try and make sure, that the LMS that you're going for has the ability to rate the courses and review the courses, because it's the users doing it that will rate and review. The benefit for you from an L&D point of view is that you can regularly review these ratings, and if you see that a course is regularly getting 2 out of 5, for instance, get it off there. Nobody wants to go on there and waste their time. But if somebody or a course is being regularly rated 4.5 or 5, then use that as your marketing. Get it out there. Okay. So I want to try and just show you a quick example of a newsletter that we created, and then I will take any questions. Okay, so this is a newsletter that we send out. All it is a direct link to this. Could you post the pages for me? Feedback from the business. Here, what we've done is these are the popular courses. If you use this type of newsletter, they can click on that and go straight to that course again. Although it sits outside the LMS, it's created that link for them. Okay? So use the feedback from the business, create the excitement, send out regular communication. And I think that's me done. So any questions?
All right, thank you, Mel. Round of applause to Mel there, thank you. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions, so if anyone has a question for Mel or Andy, I'll... oh, excellent, I'll come over here first.
Hi, Mel.
Hiya.
Thanks for your presentation. A quick question. Obviously, your experience with launching LMSs, because one way is to buy the whole thing and it's full of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's that whole, will you build, if you build it, they will come. How have you gone about launching it, and what content have you put in there? Has it been a lot? Has it been very targeted to get people to start using it?
Okay, it's a very good question. When I have done any implementations that have been successful, we've launched it in manageable chunks. So we haven't given everything at the very beginning. We've started building their understanding so they can navigate around. We have targeted specific things. As I spoke to you about the meetings, that was the biggest challenge for managers. Get them in there actually doing that. So content-wise, we've kept it minimal and built, but the content has been engaging. There is a perception from a lot of L&D professionals that what they are presenting in a classroom can just be uploaded onto the LMS. Okay, it's got a myth, complete myth. So there's a big challenge there to do that. So keep it simple, bit at a time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there another one from elsewhere? Oh.
Sorry. This one's to Andy. Andy, one of the things that you said that you at Hitachi was that you wanted your people to have a continuous learning experience as an aim. Can you tell us a little bit more around what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. The objective here is if you can think about the concept of a course that never ends. And we're doing this in two ways, and I can tell you that there is the vendor we use for one of these approaches is here downstairs, a company called Area 9, where we use their adaptive learning tool. And the concept here is around the fact that the content is constantly changing. You are forgetting stuff. And these courses will just continue to remind you to go in and consume some more content. We can change content at any given time. We can pop up a question. For example, if we change the the setup of one of our applications. So we asked the engineer, how many megabytes of RAM do you need to install XYZ? And he says, oh, I know that one, it's 4, isn't it? No, we changed it last week, actually, because that product changed, and here's some learning about what you need to know about those changes. So that's one aspect of it. The other one is really is to get people to collaborate more around learning, so that the course is not the beginning and the end of that learning journey. So and very similar to the sort of model that you see in the Open University. I'm a big fan of the OU's approach to putting collaboration around the courses, and that's probably because I did 5 years study with them for a master's. But and they have a model that goes beyond the end of your degree course. Anybody who's done an OU course can still go in as an alumni and have access to continue dialogue with your fellow students from the time, and people who have come in as students since then. So to encourage people to learn from one another, and also to start to get them to generate their own content. So if somebody on a course says, okay, here's the task, show us how you do this, and they post a video up saying, well, that's how I did it. And then 6 months down the road, somebody else in that same course says, well, actually, I'm doing it very differently to that, guys, and I think this is a better way of doing it. And exposing all that kind of content it's can you make lifelong learning out of everything you do? The answer is probably not, but we should be encouraging people to be more collaborative about how they learn and not treat that 5-day course as the beginning and the end of it all. And for us, 60% of our training is still instructor-led.
A couple of things we've done on this continual thing is that we have created to-dos in the academy. And one of those things is reviewing the productivity of your team. So they have a spreadsheet dashboard which tells them how their team are doing, but they have to do it on a regular basis, every 3 months. But it may be when they're actually doing it, they've forgotten actually how to coach or how to write a SMART goal, for instance, and that's all linked to that. So when they open that up, there's a resources tab, and they just click on those, or remind me, or forms that they can fill in. So that's the way that we've kept them continually learning, if that helps.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's effectively turning your what was a static course into an ongoing performance support environment, and I think that's possibly a better way to describe it.
Okay, well, I think unless there are other burning questions, we are spot on for time. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming along. I'd like to thank as well again to Andy and Mel for being so open and honest about everything that they've been doing with the LMS implementation. So thank you, Andy and Mel.